Hey, I'm Sam Pressler.
I'm Dave Bobrow.
And I'm PJ Walsh, and this is In Stitches, the podcast that explores the humanity and humor.
Yes, so today we're here to take a look back at our first season.
Season 1 is complete, Sam.
Thinking about where we are now and where we started. And where this started for me is right when COVID began, I was really energized to, I think as like a lot of people were, like to think about how can I make a difference? And I thought, what skills, experiences, relationships, perspectives that do I have to be helpful in this moment? And I think I ended up going all the way down the list.
The W's.
To a podcast about humor and how it could be helpful. Very much, for me, it was drawn from the experience with ASAP, knowing the veterans and military families in our programs who use humor both during and following hard times to cope, to grow, and even to thrive following those difficult times. And I was thinking about who could be an incredible partner or someone to share this conversation with. I thought of none other than you, Mr. PJ Walsh.
That's right. And I like how, Sam, you were thinking about things and you were like, hey, I want to, everything that I've done and how can I contribute, this is that. And I just picked up the phone. I'm like, sure, dude, I'm bored. What do you want to do? I'm like, yeah, man, I got nothing to do. I don't know if my career's been canceled. So I don't know if you want to. No, like, I think that call was awesome because I think I was also at the same time feeling like, okay, look, I want to be creative. I want to contribute. I want to do something. I want to write. I wasn't feeling like the Zoom comedy stuff because it's like, I don't know. I love live. When we talked about it, it was like, oh, wait, we get to really talk to somebody and explore somebody, and when we started bouncing things back and forth, we had these two different perspectives that just kind of came together where, you really want to explore everything about humor. That's why In Stitches was like the perfect name because, there's a cut and then you heal up, and it was perfect. And then also I was so interested in people's stories and how they got there. And I didn't have a doubt, Sam, that it wouldn't be interesting, but it really surpassed my expectations of interest. I really learned a lot, and it made me feel good through like a dark time.
Yeah, I think it really related back to, PJ, you and I, our kind of comedy and humor backgrounds, where we have this yes and approach to things, where it's, I came at it with this kind of more nerdy kind of understanding of the role that humor plays in health and well-being, and you had this. You added in the layer of storytelling that you were so experienced and passionate about. And we continued to add on each other. But we also realized that we were alone. We were just two legs of a three-legged stool. And that's when we decided to reach out to Mr. Dave Bobrow, who has incredible background in producing, in putting together creative content, to actually turn this into a real podcast, because you and I alone, PJ, we couldn't do it by ourselves.
Well, thanks, Sam, and thanks, PJ, too. I got to say, it's been amazing to get to know both of you better, especially what you guys did at ASAP, and now seeing a lot of that thinking play out in this podcast. Beyond that, though, selfishly, I got some really great things out of this experience so far. As a producer, I've been removed from being hands-on with a lot of the content creation for so long. And this was basically the three of us doing all the work, and production was all on me. And so I really enjoyed diving back into being hands-on and making content again.
Oh, and Dave, I just want to give you a shout out for just how good you made the series sound. Listening back, you made PJ and I in particular sound much better than we ever did when we were live.
Yeah. If it was just us, we'd have been like, oh, hit your iPhone. You good? I'm good. Like, you made this thing so, like, sounds, I mean, so good. So good. Without you, it's just not there. You can't hear it. It's a podcast.
Well, shucks, guys, really. I'm touched. But really, actually, I think one of the more compelling things that we had to face was the fact that we're doing this all in the middle of COVID. So our entire production workflow had to be done remotely. And in our case, that meant doing all of our interviews over Zoom. What's pretty phenomenal is that you guys did an amazing job getting people to really open up, eliciting trust, and convincing our guests that our intentions were altogether noble. But enough of that. Let's really get into what we did, okay?
Well, yeah, let's get into what we did.
This is really what we're here for. I want to take a look back at the moments that stuck with us, that when we think about this first season, we can't stop thinking about. PJ, what stuck with you most?
So the one that stuck out to me was the one I wasn't even on. Yoko Sin, you and Yoko got in the conversation about your own story and how much of it you can give out, and she held some of it back, and then you felt like at times that maybe you were like the poster boy for your story.
Yeah.
And it really hit me because when I did my one-man show, it was very powerful and very painful at the end. It was my life story, a lot of humor leading up to this gut punch at the end where I'm going to see 130 full of flag-draped coffins with passed away soldiers. And every night I would do it, I would always feel like, oh my God, how many times can I go to this place?
Right. I was basically a college student, and I was getting external pressure to overemphasize the role of the suicide in my family as a catalyst for the founding of the organization.
I see.
And I had no experience, right? I had not ever had to tell my story publicly before, and I didn't understand what the implications would be of making that my public story.
Right.
And for me, I didn't create that boundary. And so
Right.
it was a bit of a Pandora's box. As soon as I used that as my catalyzing incident, and I do say used somewhat intentionally, because I do feel that it wasn't fully true, I lost control of it. And when I lost control of it, it created this experience for me of feeling a little bit as if I was exploiting the trauma and tragedy in my family as a means to justify my work.
There is a implicit and explicit pressure for each fellow to, I'm not saying this, entirely negative way, but package the story in ways that could be catchy.
Mhm.
Like in 10 minutes, I can't get into my personal story that much, but just enough for that to be a story. And in the process, certain part of the story gets emphasized more than the other, and the story itself starts to gain a life of its own, and you kind of start to tell yourself that was a story. So somehow that story starts to define your life in some way.
So when you talked about that like spoke to me. And I kind of feel like a lot of these interviews, that happens for me personally, where I see shades of my own experience in what our guests are talking about, or there's a way I can relate somehow. And I think that's the beautiful part that's kind of out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dave, you were the one who listened to these episodes probably 100 times.
That's true. That's true,
100
Sam.
times more than anyone else. And so I'm interested, what moment or moments stood out to you?
I think the Dion Flynn episode, I think it's episode 3, stood out to me the most. Dion's story is one of a lot of struggle, but a hell of a lot of insight all the way through it. He's an actor, an improv artist, and amongst other things, PJ's writing partner for PJ's one-man show. The clip that I chose is about 80 minutes into the 90-minute episode, and he's talking about what it's like to be on the other side of the struggle, to finally have his moment, to finally not give up his shot. And I realize there's a little bit of a Hamilton reference here, but seeing somebody really embody that sense of gravity, that sense of the moment, it really grabbed me.
And this is the one thing where reluctantly over the years I had to just own, because I always try to throw the credit to Jimmy or to my other friends or to something else. It's that when Jimmy throws to me and the light goes on and it's my camera and I'm the only one on NBC, I have to come forward. Like Jimmy can love me and does with all of his might, but if I don't bring something forward when the light is just me, he can't save me. And that's my moment. You get your moment, and that's what you learn. It's like your moment. You're not stepping on anybody else's moment. It's your moment. And when it's your moment, you've got to bring your talent out. And there's nothing humble about not bringing all your talent forward. So that's one of many, many big lessons I've learned about being a performer, is that it doesn't serve anybody to play small when it's actually your moment.
I think this harkens back, PJ, to when there were only a few channels of TV at any given time. So being the only face on NBC was a pretty big moment. And in this case, it's joining his old college buddy, Jimmy Fallon, as a regular on The Tonight Show.
There's a lot of gold in that Dion interview, man. That's almost required listening.
Yeah. That was a master's class. I mean, I think when I think about Dion, it's this combination of his like diverse and intense life experiences, his mining of them throughout his life, then working through them via years of therapy and addiction recovery, and then finally professionally honing that story to communicate it in a one-man show format. And it just comes together in a way that's at once distinctly singular, but provides this avenue towards universality. And this is not something that's just a talent that he had. It's a craft that he's been honing for decades.
Yeah, I think craft is the right word. There's just this really insightful section about how distance plays a role in when something is funny or when something just isn't, and why. So it's a great few minutes just to get schooled on that. So now, Sam, now that we've covered off on the two clearly most awesome clips, what's left? What do you find interesting in this whole thing?
Whoa, hold on. We got this a bunch of other people here. You just knocked down what, chopped liver?
Oh, I think I may disagree with that premise. I think every episode has been pretty meaningful in a distinctive way. That said, the one that continues to stand out to me is the one with Adam Keyes. Adam is a Army veteran, a triple amputee who I've known for the last over 2 years through ASAP's comedy boot camp class. PJ has also known through the comedy program. And I think as a result of that, in our conversation, Adam really opened up about things to us and to the audience that he hadn't before. And there was this one line that's just continued to stick with me since that conversation. And he said something like, okay, I don't have legs. I might not have an arm, but what can't I do? Like, I don't think there's anything I can't do.
You had mentioned pressure, right? I do feel that. I feel it less these days, but I still do feel it, right? But to relieve that pressure, I go on stage. And sometimes it's public speaking, but mostly it's comedy these days. And it's like, I just want people to look at me not for what I don't have and look at for what I do have. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm,
okay, I'm missing awesome. Legs, I'm missing my left hand. But what can't I do? Really? I don't think there's nothing that I can't do. I never thought, even before I got injured, that there was never not one job, I don't care what it was in the military, that if I wanted to do it and was dedicated to it, that I couldn't do it. And I think that climbing that mountain, swimming that 1 mile, doing those marathons, even though I'm not, winning the race, I'm finishing the race. I'm climbing the mountain and I'm getting on the stage and I'm doing it by myself. And it's terrifying, but I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah, that was a pretty incredible episode, Sam. Also, it was great to know that Adam's appearance opened the doors for a reunion with the guy that inspired him to go to comedy in the first place, who visited him at Walter Reed way back when. That was Jeff Ross. So any other really cool moments to think of? PJ, anything really cool?
I would say for me, one of the coolest things was getting my buddy Matt Iseman on and having him tell his story. And I think we got to dismantle him in a way that no one got to. He wasn't coming in here and telling bits and telling the stock story. And there's a moment that really cracked me up. And I knew that we had him in a place. And he had said it was when he said he went to medical school because he thought it sounded cool when he answered. And then he legit goes, I never said that out loud. before, you know? And I was like, ooh, all right, we got him. We're digging in, you know? So for that, just so that I know him as a person, it was really kind of cool to that we got to frame his story for people to listen to, because obviously with his rheumatoid arthritis battle and beating cancer and stuff, it was pretty cool. And then also from the funniest moment, I think, through the whole thing was Shon, when he was talking about during the bank robbery and his partner said him by his last name. Hopwood, get the window. I was like, oh my God, that's hilarious. So those are kind of the things I kind of look back at and I'm like, man, that's there's some good funny moments.
Well, and I think it brings us to this, concept of like the importance and complexity of stories. Like every story was complex. It couldn't be distilled down to 5 minutes without total oversimplification. Like even with ASAP people, we were learning way more about them. There were people that we knew very well, and I was blown away by how much I didn't know. And when you think about telling the story of a community, which was what I used to have to do with ASAP, there are now 1,200 people in that community. And every one of those 1,200 people have a story that's like Stephanie's story or like Adam's story. For me, it reminds me of like the societal push we have to like simplify, to distill, and like ultimately to collapse context, and just the incredible value of slowing down and expanding that context, because really all of us are super complex and our stories are way more nuanced than what meets the eyes.
Oh, yeah.
For me, this was the main takeaway. It was like, yeah, we use humor as the lens through which we explored what we were doing, but the stories, the distinctive stories, the nuanced stories is what really kept us coming back.
I think Sam hit on something, and I think when we first spoke, Sam, it was kind of like what even I was talking about is I just find everybody interesting. And I got that actually from Dion and from doing solo shows. And I've seen so many different ones and seen so many people tell so many incredibly unique stories, and people visit pain and own it. So that was what was cool about this, is it brought like our two worlds together, which is, I think, is very, very, very cool.
Well, that was 3 moments out of a much greater whole that we had for season 1 of In Stitches. And we'd really be remiss if we didn't thank the 8 incredible guests that we had. Adam Keyes, Dr. Janelle Junkin, Dion Flynn, Stephanie Kline, Matt Iseman, Shon Hopwood, Yoko Sen, and Steve Mazan. Thank you for sharing with us in this first season and making those episodes just so powerful and so meaningful, both to us and for those who are listening.
Every single one of these need to be listened to because there's so much people could take away from them. And I'm looking forward to continuing doing this for another season.
Say, guys, there are a couple people I'd love to be able to thank here, since we have never thanked them appropriately on any of our episodes. First is PJ's wife, a woman who I've never met, but she was one of our early listeners. I tell you, if it weren't for her, we probably would have put out a bunch of crap in the beginning. She was an excellent critic. Number 2, I would say, is the woman who designed our logo art, Grace Mano. She took a very brief, and a bunch of ideas and a couple of really cool conversations, and she came back with a hand-stitched, gorgeous, perfect piece of podcast art.
Oh, we got so excited when we saw that. Oh, well, I want to thank you guys too. It started with the 3 of us. It was almost like it's all coming into focus, and with every single one and every meeting and every guest, it's just getting easier. And not that the interviewing anyone's ever going to be easy, and we still have to put the work in, but I think the overall structure of everything is pretty cool. I think we're really heading down the right road.
Yeah, I don't think I've laughed this hard in meetings in years.
Oh, the meetings are hilarious.
So, Sam, anybody else you want to thank? Anyone behind the scenes?
So yeah, I want to thank our communications team, Matt Condon and Kristen Howard. It was a labor of love for all of us, and just thank you guys for putting the time in to help us grow our audience for these episodes. That is a wrap. Dave and PJ, thank you for being a big part of this. Everyone listening, thank you for your feedback, for your support and joining us on the journey of this first season. And we really look forward to having y'all join us for season 2. This has been season 1 of In Stitches.